So this is my second video for Sisyphus Redeemed. The first video is up. You guys can look at it, get caught up in what's going on. I'm not going to do an overview here. I don't have time. So in my first video, there was a couple of things Sisyphus wanted to point out. First off, he's not making the strong claim that he's falsified the second premise of the KLM argument. He's only trying to cast doubt on it, or show that we have reason to not to accept it, or we lack sufficient reason to accept it, is maybe a better way to say it. The second thing is that he wants us to know that atomism isn't the only worldview that can bring the type of objection he brought. You could also have, say Wittgensteinian thought. A Wittgenstein scholar could come along and say, this is not a thing, this is a state of affairs, and this state of affairs needs to be analyzed. But it's not a thing in the relevant sense. So, all right. Now, when we talked in the last video, the attack is on whether or not things begin to exist. And so, I'm going to present Craig's philosophical analysis of beginning to exist. Note that Craig's analysis is not an explanation of the mechanism which brings things into being, nor is it an explanation of how it is that things begin to exist. It's rather marking out the conditions that are going to let us know if a thing began to exist. Did something begin to exist? Here's how you know. So, condition A is x begins to exist at time t if and only if, that's what the two F's mean, if and only if x comes into being at time t. So, x begins to exist at time t if and only if x comes into being at time t. Now you're going to say, but Mike, well, what does comes into being mean? Well, Craig, being a really good philosopher, gives us an analysis of comes into being, and he says, all right, B, x comes into being at t if and only if x exists at t, and the actual world contains no state of affairs in which x exists timelessly. So what condition 1 is to say, condition 1 is trying to get off the ground this. If something begins to exist, it doesn't exist timelessly. It doesn't exist forever. So if something begins to exist, it can't exist forever. That's condition 1. Condition 2 says t is either the first time at which x exists, or t is separated from any time less than t at which x existed by an interval during which x does not exist. So, to diagram this out, because that's a little bit of awkward wording on Dr. Craig's part, I'm going to use this kind of open space right here to diagram it out. Let's say this is x, and this is x at time t. So we'll say x as a function of t. So we'll just diagram it that way. So if at time t, x, t is the first time at which x exists, okay? Or we could have this situation. X exists, and then x does not exist, and then x exists again. So condition 2 says that at time t, it must be the case that that's either the first moment that x exists, or is the first time at which x exists. That's the first thing. Or you can have a case where t is the first time at which x existed after having not existed. So in the first case, we say this is the first point at which x existed, right here, that time t. It's either that, or it's that x existed, then stopped existing, and then existed again. So one of those two things must be true. Now, this doesn't commit Craig to saying that there has ever been a case where x existed, then stopped existing, then existed again. He's only saying, if that were to happen, if it ever were the case that something were to exist, then to not exist, and then to exist again, that the second time of its existing would be a beginning to exist. That's all he's saying. He's saying it would have come into being again. That's what he's getting at. So x came into being and then it went out of being, stopped existing, and then if it shows up again, it came into being a second time. That's all he's saying. Now he's not saying that that ever happened, but if that were to happen, the second appearance of x would be a coming into being. Now, you guys deny coming into being, but we'll get to that. I'm just laying Dr. Craig's view out. The third condition he has is x's existing at t is a tensed fact. Now, what that's to get off the ground is A theories of time. Now, an A theory of time holds that time actually passes. There are genuine series of events. There's a past, present, and future. The past doesn't exist. The present does exist. The future will exist, but doesn't exist yet. That kind of a thing. B theories of time deny that and say that time is only something that your mind invents. Time is a product, or some B theories of time hold that there is no tenses in the sense of that we think of tenses. Space-time is really just a four-dimensional block. There's no time passing. So the present, the past, and the future all actually exist presently. They're all currently existing. It's not that the past used to exist, it's past exists. So, and this gets Dr. Craig an A theory of time. And he defends his A theory of time in his book, I believe it's called God, Time, and Eternity. I don't have time to defend it. I'm just putting out on the table what Craig's got when he talks about beginning to exist and comes into being.